Hi, Brit.
Hi, Kristian. Welcome to the Superhuman Mind channel.
So today we were going to talk about histrionic personality disorder. Do you want to give kind of an overview of?
Yeah, so it's among it's a sort of dramatic disorder where people are very attention seeking, and they also sometimes called drama queens in colloquial language. It afflicts more women than men, though there are some men who would be drama kings if they had this personality disorder. It can also involve sort of unusual sexual behavior, very flirtatious behavior, or sexual advances or approaches, or sexualized dressing, sexualized clothing. But it's a sort of an extreme form of attention seeking and sort of loud entrance into the room and making sure that you're the center of attention. And it usually involves some egoism, so not narcissism in the narcissistic personality disorder sense, but some level of narcissism, and also they can be very manipulative. So they have a sort of high social intelligence, but will tend to use their social intelligence to manipulate others to get what they want. So that's an overview.
Yeah, I have.
So, know anyone with that disorder?
Well, probably everybody has a friend or two that are
Yeah.
who are that way, or maybe even themselves. Um, I know I had an experience one time, and I was in a lecture hall, and we were learning about it, and I had known, I already knew what it was, but the class was talking about it, uh, and the entire room kind of got quiet and all started looking over at one person who was kind of in the front corner, and she totally knew it was she had that and just turned around and smiled at everybody, and everybody kind of burst out laughing. Because she was just totally histrionic. Um, but I think it can be much more subtle sometimes too, right?
Yeah, it can be subtle. It doesn't have to be the extreme kinds. In the extreme kind, people can also lose their functionality because they can't get along with people at work or people at school. But in more subtle cases, it can be a more passive form of it. So you can be extremely manipulative in more passive ways that are harder to detect, and but it still is about primarily about attention seeking, where it's not so obvious that that's what's wrong. And some people who are better manipulators than others, of course, will find ways of doing it where it's not clear that they have been manipulating other people. So at least one theory is that it does have something in common with antisocial personality disorder. That it's a matter of being sort of controversial in different ways. So the antisocial personality disorder, it afflicts a person who is constantly sort of in breach of the law, for example, but that can also be more
Hmm.
subtle, and just sort of is the kind of person that's hard to get along with. And there's some speculation that because women who want to get their way, sort of in the media and historically, have been able to get their way through their sexual expression,
Hmm.
and by being dramatic, that women who have a small degree of antisocial personality disorder develop histrionic personality disorder, whereas men tend to have just a smaller degree of antisocial personality disorder.
Okay. So, so histrionic people don't only include kind of center of attention types, then, but also people who kind of seems like they start trouble, or those are the friends that are kind of always mad at someone about something.
Yeah, so it can definitely be attention seeking in that way. I would still call it attention seeking. It's just a different kind of attention seeking, but if you're the person who's always complaining about something or
Mm-hmm.
is always mad at someone, and so it's always sort of seeking to start a conflict, whether they are involved or not. It can also be the person who likes to gossip a lot, but with the not with the main primary goal of being entertaining, but
Mm-hmm.
with the primary goal of starting a conflict.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it can certainly be people who are interested in starting conflicts, personal conflicts, either that they're involved in or that they're not involved in, but they're instigators of it. So the people who gossip not to have a good story to tell, or guess what I heard today, or so not that kind of person, but the person who is wants other people to get in trouble, so
Mm-hmm.
they might be gossiping in order to get other people in trouble, or in order to start a conflict between other people. Or it can be people who are always complaining and finding something
Mm-hmm.
that's wrong at, say, the workplace, or it's at school. So there's always something wrong with the teachers, or there's always something wrong with the other people in the class. So yeah, so it can also have that side of it. It's still kind of attention seeking, but maybe there's more of a it's more than just attention in those cases. It's
Mm-hmm.
also that they enjoy these conflicts. They
Mm-hmm.
enjoy the drama. So sometimes the attention doesn't have to be attention to themselves, but can just be sort of enjoying watching the drama from across the hall or something like that.
Mm-hmm. So, do you think there are any kind of situations or roles where the histrionic person is really benefits from that, though?
I think there could probably be cases where they benefit in unusual, or maybe not so unusual, but in some circumstances, it may be that a person can get more of a raise and get more of sort of get an easier way to promotion
Mm-hmm.
if the people in a company think that, oh, we need to find a way of quieting down that woman, or man if it's a man, so we um, let's just give her that raise, or let's just give her that promotion so she
Mm-hmm.
can stop complaining about the other people getting it. So I think in some cases there can probably be some advantage to it. In other cases, I think that there's probably no advantage to it, especially not if they're so extreme that everyone can look right through them and see that they're just the typical people who are always complaining, always mad at people, who always want some drama going on.
Mm-hmm.
Then I don't think it has the same advantage. But if people are more manipulative in a more subtle way, they may be able to manipulate things such that they are getting ahead in the game, or are getting a promotion, or are getting better grades. Maybe they can be the kinds of people who are sort of seeking attention in class by
Mm-hmm.
constantly raising their hand even when it's irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
And if the teacher is not can see through that, they might maybe, if, depending on what the participation is part of that grade, they might get a better grade out of that.
Mm-hmm.
But there might also be cases where it's going to hurt them. What do you think?
Well, I can tell you in law school, certainly they do not. I mean, that's a well, in your first year, that's a problem for some people, but the professors very quickly kind of snuff it out. It's kind of a part of the culture there, that they call them gunners. They're the people who are constantly raising their hand about little tiny micro issues that don't. I mean, are sometimes are really interesting issues, but don't are wasting a lot of time to talk about, and
Yeah.
so you kind of learn not to do that. But
So they see through it.
yeah, they see through it pretty quickly, and I think because you're kind of trained to go into court and just be quiet until it's your turn to talk, and so they are very good about kind of teaching you that very early, just to learn how to keep what's in your head there, and only say what you need to say. Um, but it can have I think it can have some, I think at the same time, uh, when I was in grad school, where discussion was it was much less of a lecture and it was much more discussion style. The people who were the constant hand raisers sometimes were, um, you know, kind of moved the discussion along very well, or created
Yeah.
some controversy that was actually really beneficial to people who otherwise wouldn't really chime in until they're kind of pushed to the limit.
Yeah.
You,
Yeah.
you know, not I wouldn't say like socially, but almost like intellectually, like they just can't take it anymore, and so they had to raise their hand also.
Yeah.
So I think that was a situation where um, it could be beneficial if you had a professor who could
Beneficial to others in
to
that case.
others. If you had a moderator, if you have a moderator who can kind of keep it organized.
Yeah.
Because I mean it seems like celebrities also I mean a lot of them are very histrionic,
Yeah.
and
It's
some
almost
really
as if
benefit from
part
that.
of the. What was that?
I mean, some really benefit from um, that behavior, but it can go too far also. So like Miley Cyrus, is clearly histrionic, but it seems like she, um, for a period of time at least, was kind of lost her way to moderate it. She kind of went a little too wild, and
Yeah.
for a while it really boosted her career, and then it got to the point where I think it started to affect it negatively, and so now I
Right.
think she's kind of um, scaled back a little bit.
Yeah.
Of course, Charlie Sheen I don't know if that was a drug induced histrionic
Yeah. That certainly can be drug
situation,
induced, I believe.
um, but that was another kind of rapid decay.
Yeah.
So how
Yeah.
do you
That's certainly cases where drugs can induce that kind of, or medications can induce that kind of.
so how
Um,
do you deal with a peer that is histrionic? If you don't want to just cut them out of your life, how do you um, or what do you think you should do to kind of be able to cope with it?
to moderate them.
Yeah.
Well, there are cases of people where you just can't take it anymore, and you can't, and you end up cutting them out of your life. But in some cases, you can't cut them out of your life. I mean, if they're your colleagues or your people in your class, you can't just cut them out of your life. I think. Well, it certainly depends on the kind of type of person it is. If it's a type of person who likes to create drama and is seeking to get you involved in a drama, there may be ways you can stay out of it. So you want to be careful not to be pulled into one of those conflicts that they're trying to create, which of course can be really difficult if they're
Mm.
saying things that push you right to the limit. So you feel like you should get involved, but there might be cases where you don't want to get involved in their conflicts or dramas because you're not going to win, because you have a certain way of moderating your own behavior, whereas the other person does not.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think that one can do?
Um, well, I'm not really sure. I mean, I think in some situations that you can just kind of look past it or embrace it. I mean, sometimes there's people that uh, are the really fun, wild friends who kind of
Yeah,
stir in the pot. They can be a lot of fun, but it's definitely hard to I think stay close with people like that,
yeah,
because you can't really confide in them necessarily.
yeah. You probably don't want to be married to a person like that.
Right. Um, and I think a lot of the behavior sometimes can be learned from your parents. So there's a lot of people I know or people I've met over the years who have kind of histrionic traits. Um, I mean, there's one person I know who, I met him and thought, wow, he's just a dead ringer for histrionic personality disorder. And then I met his father, and it changed the whole way I perceived him, because I realized that he was competing with a father who was just I mean, so much worse that um, I mean he was you couldn't expect anything else from the
Right.
children. Um, but I think maybe culturally also, I mean, aren't some cultures more prone to um, that kind of
I mean, certainly
style?
Western culture would be more prone to it, right? Is that the kind of cultural difference you have in mind, or more like subcultures?
Well, I was thinking, I mean, maybe it's because I'm in Texas, so there's a lot of Hispanics around me, just in general, friends and everything. But it seems to me like the people I've met who, or I could really point out as being histrionic, are a lot of Latin people I've met.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
they,
in that sense, like that can be a kind of culture that promotes that, but it can also be, as you mentioned, actors and actresses,
mm,
right? So it can also be other sort of semi-famous people. So certain circles of people who have a certain kind of status.
mm,
Doesn't have to be like world or even nationwide renowned status, but maybe within a circle of friends, if one person has a certain kind of status that makes them seem like famous within that circle, not just a circle of friends, maybe a small town or something like that. I
mm,
think that might also, if you have just that one, that might not do it. But if you had a number of these people, they might start to act in the way that, say, actors and actresses would
mm,
act at a more at a national level or international level. Um, but yeah, I mean, these Hispanics can in Miami that can yeah, it's hard to say that that's the culture that promotes it, but there's also a different kind of Hispanic person that tends to be in Miami. Um,
mm,
but there are certainly Hispanic people who have that kind of personality. But then there are also Hispanic people who are more timid,
mm,
um, in particularly in the more low paying jobs.
okay,
So they will tend to be much more quiet than the non Hispanic people who
mm,
work the same jobs.
mm,
Um, and whereas the non-Hispanic people, even in very low-paying jobs, can be sort of loud
mm,
and attention-seeking in some ways. Sometimes Hispanic are the opposite, sort of keeping to themselves, keeping quiet.
mm,
Whereas Hispanic people who have more influence in Miami, I think, are more likely to fall into that category.
mm,
So there really is like two types of, well, that would be an exaggeration, but there are two types of Hispanics in Miami that seem to sort of constantly come to your attention. There are those in
mm,
the low paying jobs, and then there are those that really have a lot of money,
mm,
like old money, um, and you have a lot of those people in Miami.
mm,
So when you go to the sort of rich Hispanic people, you see a lot of people with sort of histrionic traits. But again, I mean, that may not be because they're Hispanic. It may be because they have a lot of money. They're used to people working for them.
mm,
They're used to getting things easy because they have a lot of old money, and so it's hard to say what the influence is.
mm.
How do you see that in Texas? Is the composition there is a little bit different.
Yeah, it's a little bit. I guess what I'm thinking of is the kind of the stereotypical like Latin woman who's who's kind of that become kind of staple characters on television, like
Uh,
Sofia Vergara's character on Modern Family, who's just this kind of loud, wild, beautiful woman who's kind of
yeah,
steamrolls over everybody all the time. Um,
yeah, you definitely have some of those too.
um, but I can certainly say a lot of lawyers have histrionic
Right.
personality disorder. But that's another situation where I think that I think it can be beneficial for. Um, uh, I mean, you meet a lot of lawyers who are that way, and it is the reason why there are so many lawyer jokes. But some of those people are, I mean, do a great job in the courtroom. They're great showmen. Um,
Right.
outside of court, you really don't like to be around them. But when you're in the setting where they're that one setting, they're kind of brilliant to watch. I mean, they can really sway people
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
to go their way, and they really and you they're histrionic also because a lot of times the only kind of dividend they're getting out of that is the attention of the win, right?
Right.
Um,
Right.
especially in the lower areas of court where there's not really, I mean, where it's not high stakes and there's not high pay or anything like that. Um,
Yeah.
but just the attention is what drives them, and they do very good in that situation.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I can see those traits in many of the lawyers I've known or had to deal with in my life. I can see that they're some of them can be quite entertaining outside of the courtroom too.
Right.
So they are the ones that are sort of more pleasantly the center of attention. So the ones, so you were talking about lawyer stories, but it's also lawyers. A lot of lawyers I know, they just have a lot of stories to tell. Probably all lawyers do, but then they also like to tell them, and they're good at it. So they automatically get the attention, right, when you're at a social gathering or something, because they just have the most interesting stories, so they can put a spin on it.
Mm-hmm.
They're good storytellers. So that may be the more positive version of the person with histrionic traits, that they do get the attention and they like the attention, but they're not completely annoying, and they don't really create any drama that's uncomfortable for people.
Mm-hmm.
So probably that can be versions of that as well.
So what do you do? What do you think? I guess the last thing is what do you think you do if you might be a histrionic person? How do you deal with that?
If you yourself is histrionic,
Right.
yeah. So I guess you should evaluate to what extent it's negatively affecting your life, or whether you are actually acting in a completely immoral way by being manipulative, right? So if you're the good version of the histrionic, who is just the attention-seeking, interesting storyteller, who is the center of attention at parties and so on, but where it's not really harming other people or harming your reputation, then I guess you can just carry on. If it's harming your personal relationships or your job, or your relationship with your colleagues or your friendships, your relationship with your family, your ability to function, then of course you need to moderate. I think then you need to moderate those behaviors. It's hard to change the personality, but you can certainly moderate. You can be in control over your actions. You can be in control over whether you satisfy the desire to do what you're doing. What do you think can be?
No, I agree. I think that's a good strategy. Um, of course, I mean, maybe another thing you could do is kind of ask closer friends, their frank opinion,
Yeah.
or tell them to. I think for people who have a histrionic personality disorder, that sometimes they get caught up in the moment, and they kind of don't realize it until they've gone too far.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so if you had a significant other or a friend around that's all the time, tell them, let me know when I'm getting a little bit too, I'm starting to go too wild, and then you can just
Yeah.
kind of scale it back or ignore them and just continue on.
Right.
Well, all right.
All right. Okay. So this was the Superhuman Mind Turtle.
And we'll be back next week.
Yeah, we will. All right. Bye, Chris.